In anger, I usually regret the way I express myself.
In anger, I usually regret the way I express myself. There are men who don't kill you with knives, but with compliments and touches, masked by Hollywood smiles. She is Uma Thurman, the epitome of icy beauty, the star of Pulp Fiction and Kill Bill. Why is Uma Thurman speaking out? Bill, but behind those dagger-sharp eyes lie decades of endurance, manipulation, and betrayal. 5 men, 5 scars, 5 dark chapters in the life of an icon betrayed by the very people she once called colleagues, lovers, even saviors. Who are they? Now is the time you meet Uma Thurman, not through the movies, but through raw, unedited pain. She was once the icy muse who made millions of men tremble with just a furrowed brow. She was the symbol of a generation of women who dared to kill their cheating husbands, who reclaimed their honor with blood, both on screen in Quentin Tarantino films and off. But few know that, before becoming the bride, Uma had once been the prey of the very directors, co-stars, and even the man she once loved. Born in 1970, Uma grew up in an eccentric, intellectual family. Her mother was a high-fashion model, her father a renowned professor of Buddhist studies. From a young age, she struggled with feeling like she was being treated as a product because of her towering height, angular face, and intelligence that made her hard to control. But it was exactly that uncontrollable quality that caught Hollywood's attention. She skyrocketed to fame with Dangerous Liaisons, Pulp Fiction, and Kill Bill, but along with the spotlight came sweetly disguised traps. She was once forced to perform a nude scene without warning, surrounded by dozens of men laughing on set. She was once forcibly kissed by a co-star on camera, only to have the director say, "Keep it, it's real." She once fell for a famous man, only to discover he brought his mistress to an event she had organized. In 2017, Uma exploded like a bomb in the #MeToo movement, boldly naming Harvey Weinstein, the man who once trapped her in a hotel room, locked the door from the outside, and who is now serving 23 years in prison for decades of sexual harassment, rape, and abuse of power. But long before the world accepted that truth, Uma had already spent her youth in darkness. She was forced to drive a car with faulty brakes, pressured to film violent scenes while injured, and threatened with career destruction if she ever spoke out. Today, at 55, she doesn't have to act anymore. She is no longer the bride. She is herself, and she will name every man who broke her, who drowned her so they could rise. The first man, Quentin Tarantino. He put his reputation above my life to protect Harvey Weinstein. They were once the embodiment of Hollywood artist Uma, the icy enigmatic star, Quentin, the mastermind behind cinema's most beautifully staged murders. Together, they made Pulp Fiction and then Kill Bill, a film that made the whole world bow in awe. But the price was blood, flesh, and a betrayal Uma carried for more than 20 years. In April 2002, on the set of Kill Bill, Quentin demanded that Uma drive an old car herself down a slippery gravel-covered road. She refused. Panicked. "It's not safe. The brakes don't work. It shakes. I don't want to die for a movie scene." Quentin didn't listen. He yelled, he ordered, and Uma, fully aware she was 6 weeks pregnant, had to get in the car. The car slammed straight into a tree. She blacked out. Blood ran from her knees. Her arms limp. The crew wasn't allowed to run to her because Quentin screamed, "Keep rolling. Steve Bannon, don't cut." This scene is unbelievably real. When Uma woke up in the hospital, she had a spinal injury and her pregnancy was at risk for 2 weeks. And it didn't end there. Tarantino chose to protect Harvey Weinstein instead of the life of the woman who once called him a soulmate. She asked for the footage to use as evidence. Harvey Weinstein, the lead producer, refused. They hid the footage, blamed technical issues, and Quentin, her closest friend, stayed silent. "I used to think he was an artist, but no, he was just a pawn, bowing to protect a man who raped women in the dark." The second man, Ethan Hawke, the one who turned love into a slap on the Oscars red carpet. In the 1990s, Uma Thurman and Ethan Hawke were Hollywood's golden couple. She, the icy beauty from Quentin Tarantino's films. He, the poetic heartthrob made famous by Dead Poets Society. When they came together, all of Hollywood seemed ready to build them a monument. In 1998, they married. Uma gave birth to their first daughter, Maya Hawke. She stepped back from the spotlight. Choosing to build the home to Uma, Ethan was everything her safe place. The man she believed would hold her hand for life. But then everything shattered like a black and white film being rewound. In 2003, Uma found a message on Ethan's phone, not from a fan but from the young nanny watching their child. She was only 20. Ethan had just taken her on a film tour in Toronto. "He didn't even tell me he took her publicly while I was at home caring for our child and writing lines for a new script." The betrayal broke Uma. She filed for divorce, but Ethan, instead of apologizing, retaliated. In 2004, at the 76th Academy Awards, Ethan arrived with his new girlfriend. She wore a white dress, the same one Uma had worn in their wedding photos. In front of hundreds of cameras, Ethan looked straight into the lens and said, I've always believed I deserved someone who doesn't live in the past. Uma didn't say a word. She simply withdrew. Months later, in an interview, she said, "People don't just take your heart. They rip it out, put it in a glass box, and display it for the world to laugh at." I loved Ethan so much, I couldn't see the lies. I thought he was gentle, but I learned a man who writes poetry doesn't always keep his promises. But don't think the pain ends here. The third man was even worse. Not only did he exploit Uma's body, but he sold her out like merchandise to producers in exchange for lead roles. The third man, Steve Bannon. He traded me like merchandise to secure multi-million-dollar film deals. Before becoming a political strategist, Steve Bannon was a film producer. In the 2000s, he rose in Hollywood as a behind-the-scenes mobster with power in the independent studio world. At the time, Uma, trying to reclaim her spotlight after her divorce from Ethan Hawke, signed on to a film project backed by Bannon. She believed it was her comeback. But in truth, it was a chessboard, and she was the only pawn, unaware she was being moved. From the very first week, Bannon invited Uma to a private dinner to discuss the script. There was no director, no screenwriter, just him, hard liquor, and 2 overflowing glasses of champagne. When Uma refused to stop by his room after the party, he laughed, then said in a voice colder than steel, "Uma, you're not a queen anymore. You're just an investment I need to recoup." Uma walked out, but 3 days later, she received the notice. Her role had been cut, her contract terminated, and her name erased from all posters and trailers under the excuse of a marketing shift. Bannon even leaked an internal email with the subject line, "She didn't sleep with the director, cut her." I used to think I was strong, but when a man reduces you to an unpaid invoice, you start to understand why some actresses disappeared forever. Uma Thurman withdrew from Hollywood for nearly 3 years. She turned down every offer. She said, "I no longer believe cinema is art. I see it as a sex market disguised by scripts." The fourth man, Harvey Weinstein. He wasn't a director, he was a hunter in the disguise of cinema. Harvey Weinstein, the mogul behind Miramax, the man who brought Pulp Fiction to the world and who once called Uma Thurman his irreplaceable muse. But what Uma didn't know was that being a muse was just another role in his collection of victims. London, 1994. Uma was doing promotional work for a Miramax film. Weinstein invited her to the Savoy Hotel to discuss a global campaign. She went, believing it was a strategy meeting, but once the door closed, she realized there was no crew, no assistant, only him in a bathrobe. "Uma, you know what we are to each other. You owe me those legendary roles." She tried to open the door. He blocked her. She ran, thought she had escaped. But what came after was worse. Weinstein didn't apologize. He didn't avoid her. He punished her. Uma was cut from 3 consecutive Miramax projects. Directors she had worked closely with began to distance themselves, and Quentin Tarantino, once an ally, stayed completely silent. I couldn't believe that a man who once called me the queen of indie film could so easily destroy me just because I wouldn't share a bed with him for one night. Uma spiraled into psychological crises. She took sedatives daily, nearly dropped out of Kill Bill Volume 2 because she couldn't face his eyes behind the scenes. It wasn't until the #MeToo movement exploded that Uma finally spoke out.